Perry Rise Special Month of Prayer, Sunday the 7th of June, the 15 Languages of Love. Message number 1. 5 minus 1 equals 0. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 31. I will show you a still more excellent way. Dwight L. Moody, the Billy Graham of the 19th century, tells of his life-changing encounter with the doctrine of love. It began when Henry Morehouse, a 27-year-old British evangelist, preached at Moody's church for a week. To everyone's surprise, Morehouse preached 7 sermons in a row, all on John chapter 3, verse 16. To prove that God so loved the world, he preached on the love of God all the way from Genesis to Revelation. It was an amazing week of teaching. Unable to hold back the tears as Morehouse preached on the love of God in sending his only son to die for sinners, Moody in the congregation said, "I never knew up to that time that God loved us so much. This heart of mine began to thaw out. I could not keep back the tears. It was like good news from a far-off country. I just drank it in." There is one thing that gets our attention more than anything else in the world, and that is love. After hearing Morehouse preach, Moody began to study the teaching about love, and it changed his life. Later on he said, "I took up the word love, and I do not know how many weeks I spent studying the passages in which it occurs, till at last I could not help loving other people. I had been feeding on love for so long that I was anxious to do good to everybody I met." Moody was absolutely right when he said, God's work cannot be done without love. And that is the message of perhaps the most famous chapter on love in the Bible, 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Do read the whole chapter if you like as we go into this month of prayer. This chapter was written as part of a letter written by Paul, the well-known apostle, to the church in Corinth. Many people would agree that Paul was one of the greatest missionaries and scholars and teachers and evangelists, and really a hero of our faith. He was a brilliant man, extremely gifted, and yet he knew that his brilliance and his sacrificial dedication meant nothing if it wasn't completely bathed in love. No other New Testament writer spoke more about love or provided more practical examples of how to love than Paul, and nowhere is this made more clear than in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And yet Paul wrote this passage in response to divisions and disruptions that were happening in the church in Corinth, all about their personal and spiritual gifts. He wrote to correct the church's misguided view of spiritual gifts and its self-destructive way of behaving. Paul promised to show the Corinthians a more excellent way. Listen to the beginning of the chapter, 1 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 31 and going into chapter 13. I will show you a still more excellent way. If I speak in the languages of people and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. And if I give away everything I have, and even give up my body, but have not love, I gain nothing. Let's take a closer look at some of the sentences in this passage. Without love, even heavenly languages sound annoying. The purpose of spiritual gifts is to build up and unite the body of Christ, and yet the Corinthians were so enthusiastic about the gift of speaking in other languages that they became proud and caused disorder in their worship. The Corinthians were a bit independent-minded and fell into the trap of using their gifts to gratify their own egos, and this caused division in the church. Paul got their attention by imagining himself as the world's most gifted linguist, even speaking in the tongues of angels. This kind of gift would surely have impressed the Corinthians, but Paul says that he would have been no more than a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal if he used it without love. Imagine if while I was speaking to you, there was somebody right beside me hitting a gong or clanging a cymbal the whole way through what I was saying. It wouldn't make it very easy to hear, would it? Paul says we must never use our gifts to glorify ourselves, because that just blots out what God is trying to say to the church. Next, without love, knowing everything helps no one. Paul next imagines himself as having a gift of prophecy so amazing that he could explain all mysteries and all knowledge, and so he could tell people exactly who God is and what he's all about. But Paul says that even if he had knowledge like this that could explain God to us, but have this without love, he would just be nothing, a spiritual zero. A loveless prophet, a loveless teacher, is worthless in discipling God's people. John Short says, "Loveless faith and loveless prophecy account for some of the most tragic pages in the Christian story through the ages." In a similar vein, George Sweeting, former president of the Moody Bible Institute, says, "I have been so disappointed to find people are more interested in working out theological mysteries than they are about helping the needy." Let's not get too caught up with hidden truths and become indifferent to loving some of the difficult people that come along our way. Paul also goes on to say that without love, risk-taking faith is worthless. Paul imagines that he has enough faith to remove mountains. Like Abraham, he would believe God for the impossible and trust him to do miraculous works. He would be a powerhouse of prayer, a spiritual risk-taker, admired by all. But even with such a powerful spiritual gift, if love is not present, the gift can become a means of glorifying ourselves instead of serving others. Our autobiography may be written, but it won't refer to God. It'll only say how great we were. And then Paul goes on to say that without love, giving away everything we own to the poor is unprofitable. Give away your home, your property, your furniture, your savings, everything you love. Reduce yourself to poverty. Isn't this love in action? Not necessarily. Paul makes clear that even great self-sacrifice can be done without love. Think of Ananias and Sapphira in the book of Acts. This couple sold their property and gave the money to the disciples to give to the poor, but they gave it without love. They held some things back. Perhaps they just wanted to have a good reputation. They weren't thinking first of love for God and their neighbour, a bit like the Pharisees who would blow trumpets when they were on their way to go to the temple to make their gifts. Love was a bit hypocritical, giving to the poor, but without the true inner motivating power of love, so that their great gifts profited nothing to themselves. They were financially wealthy, but spiritually bankrupt because God rejected the gift. Last of all, Paul imagines himself as a hero of faith. He gives up his body to the flames of martyrdom. When it is motivated by the welfare of others and the glory of Christ, martyrdom can be the ultimate sacrifice of love. Jonathan Edwards, in his book Charity and Its Fruits, summarises God's perspective of love and self-sacrifice like this: God delights in little things when they spring from sincere love to himself. A cup of cold water given to a disciple in sincere love is worth more to God than giving all our goods to the poor, or even the wealth of a whole kingdom, or a body offered up to the flames without love. Only when all our actions are done as a direct result of love for God and for others, only then is it the more excellent way. D.A. Carson, Bible commentator and professor of New Testament, describes Paul's reasoning in the passage in terms of divine mathematics. According to divine mathematics, 5 minus 1 equals 0. These 5 great gifts, speaking in other tongues, giving our goods away, all the different things and knowledge that we can have, all these things minus love, minus that vital one, equals nothing but 0. But with love, it equals everything, everything in the sight of God. God bless you.